Welcome to the Thursday edition of the Chiefs, and with us right now are Anna-Marie Pamintuan of the Philippine Star and Robbie Alampay of One News. Ami is coming online. There you go. There's Ami, and Robbie's there in the middle. Ami, of course, from the port area, and Robbie, of course, from Mandaluyong, and I am in my back cave. What's our story for tonight and for tomorrow morning?
Well, yung pa rin Bucor, no? Their chief, sabi niya, is willing to resign. He's willing to step down if people daw have lost trust in him. And this is amid the calls of the senators nga for him to go on leave at least. Habang nagbabalak sila, hinahanda nila yung investigation. Yan yung
Yeah, they're also saying they can prove everything. They say everything was on record. I don't know exactly if that means na everything was on camera or naka-logbook and so on. At the same time, they're emphasizing that they have witnesses, among other things, doctors and so on. Kaya lang, every time somebody says we have it on record, at the same time, meron kaming witness. Parang napapag-isipan. Sandalan to, witness o meron talagang naka-record?
Yeah. Tapos,
Pero yun nga, but sabi nga kahapon ni Senator Dick Gordo, na your witnesses are probably the same people who testified in the Senate inquiry on the corruption and the irregularities in the Bucor Hospital.
Oo. Yung isa pang ang istorya, yun namang yung sa binalik na yung ban on non-essential travel, no? Kasi wala daw insurance coverage. Iisa lang yata ang kanya willing na mag-consider ng risk. So yun.
Isa lang yung tumatanggap. So it's not about the protocols in the airports. It's not about the protocols in the planes. The airlines are ready. In fact, maraming pinapakita rin yung mga airlines natin, no? Yung mga different and it's not even about the protocols abroad. Kung saan ka man pupunta. It's just the practicality of the fact na there's, as Abby said, only one insurance company.
Wala kang insurance. And hey, there's one more story also COVID related. The preparations for Monday SONA, yung mga balak mag-rally, they've been given 2 hours to stage the rally. Ang hindi lang klaro, at least as far as I can tell, ang hindi nila nakaklaro, kung ilan ang pwedeng mag-rally. Kasi may IATF guideline na hanggang 10 lang ang pwedeng mag-rally.
Siguro kung iba-ibang segment, baka naman pwede. Yung magkakalayo na di ba? O magkakalayo.
Kunwari, galit tayo, ganun.
Yan. I mean, iba-ibang kanto ng ibang area. Yung 10-10-10. Baka naman pwede yun. But anyway, that's 2 hours.
Yeah, sabi naman ni Mayor Joy Belmonte ng Quezon City, they will be reasonable about it. And then on the protester side, parang kanina nung binabasa ko yung balita sa Big Story, yung protesters naman parang sabi nila, handa naman kami, creative naman kami. If we need to do things online, looks like they have something up their sleeves also. Parang hindi naman big deal sa kanila yung, at least yung demeanor nila kanina, parang hindi naman big deal kung kailangan talaga magbago plan.
Tapos,
pero alam mo yung
isa pang istorya. Yung mga summa cum laude ng UP. Ang dami naman. At ang speaker is from mass communication. Graduation speaker.
Talaga? May nagsuma ng Mascom?
Oo, suma ng Mascom. Siya yung...
Nung panahon ko, imposible yun.
Kasi pag
nung panahon ko, yung mga estudyante, bising-busy, sumasayaw, nagpa-practice mga variety show, o kaya umiinom.
But anyway, of course, yung isa pang istorya is the latest, 14 na yung final na case, for against
I think it's 16 already.
15 na, if I'm not mistaken.
And yun yung mga guests natin ngayon, so maybe we can bring them in. Nandiyan na ba sila?
Yun. Si Ami talaga ang ating segue queen. Well, as Ami said, our guests for tonight are at least 2 of the groups that filed the petitions to stop the anti-terror law. With us tonight are attorneys Erin Tañada and attorney Dino de Leon. They both filed petitions against the anti-terror law, I think also today. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the Chiefs again. Hi, sir.
Yes. Good evening,
Hi.
Ed. Good evening, Robbie and Amy.
Yes.
Sir, run us through, before anything else, run us through the salient points. No, sige, wag ang salient points. Yung sa tingin niyo yung yung pinakamatibay at pinakamalakas ninyong argumento versus the anti-terror law na maaring mag-sway ng Supreme Court sa inyong pananaw. Ano yung pinakamatibay?
Well, tingin ko, unang-una, ang heart ng ating Constitution ay yung Bill of Rights, no? At hindi natin pwedeng maisantabihan dahil yan po ay galing sa naging kasaysayan natin sa martial law. At kung titignan nga po natin dito, yung makikita natin, yung pinakamalakas, I would say, is yung detention, no, ng 24 hours
yung 14 plus
without
10.
a warrant.
24 days.
Yes. 24 days without judicial notice, no? So ito clearly a violation of the Constitution which gives a maximum of 3 days. Kaya sa tingin ko doon pa lang malakas na ang pwedeng argumento dito para isang tabi itong batas na ito.
Sir, yung 1997 na Human Security Act, ilang days ang inallow doon na warrantless arrest? Was it also 3 days as per the Constitution or was it more than 3 days?
The Human Security Act of 2007, the maximum allowable period was 3 days.
3 days pa rin. So that was within the constitutional requirement.
Complied with the constitutional requirement.
Okay. Attorney, in the meantime, alam niyo naman, I mean, even before we get to your petitions, I just want to ask, right now, ang isa pang issue is supposedly in effect na yung law, wala pang implementing rules and regulations. How do you see this panning out in the coming days?
Well, it cannot be implemented now because there are no guidelines, no, that the council have come out with. Secondly, if they try to explain further the law, which would try to bend towards constitutionality, still what the Supreme Court would look at is still the law itself and not the implementing rules, because the implementing rules cannot redefine the law. So at this point, without any implementing rules, technically, the Anti-Terror Act cannot be implemented at this point.
Well, so far, hindi pa naman siya
Pero let's introduce lang first si Attorney Dino de Leon who also joins us tonight. Medyo nalit ng konti pero si Attorney Dino is also online. Sir, good evening po. Ami, go ahead.
Yes, good evening, good evening.
Hindi pa naman siya na-i-implement kahit several days na according to our officials na in-effect na siya. What makes you think merong debate whether the Supreme Court can even act on it? Gayong wala pa namang actionable daw na case. Anong argument ninyo dito for the Supreme Court to accept the petitions? Although na-consolidate na nila, no? Ano sa tingin niyo ang argument niyo na dapat magkaroon ng ruling sa mga petition niyo?
Well, if I may answer that, no.
Yes,
if you're contesting the constitutionality of a law, the mere enactment of that particular law, especially if it concerns the Bill of Rights, is already an actual controversy. And then pag ito ay void, if it's very void on its face, then it can be challenged. That's what we call a facial challenge according to constitutional law. No? So we don't need an actual arrest based on it, although we hope that we will not face any exercise of the rights of the ATC at this point in time, as early as now. And hopefully the Supreme Court will issue the TRO and the writ of preliminary injunctions.
Sir, follow ko lang yung kay Ami. What makes this different from the previous challenge versus the anti-terror law na ang sinabi ng Supreme Court hindi pa siya actionable? What makes this different in that particular case?
Malaki yung difference, no, in this particular case which was discussed in our petition. Ito kasi, sabi ng Supreme Court sa Human Security Act is kailangan it's as applied kasi hindi malabo yung definition ng terrorism. In fact, clear kung ano exactly yung mga acts na sakop nito. Kaya kailangan magawa mo muna yung acts na yon before your actions will be punishable under the HSA. Pero in the case of the anti-terror law of 2020, malabo yung definitions, number one. And number two, it's the Anti-Terror Council who can actually order your arrest, your detention for as much as 24 days. And that power belongs to the ATC, no? So ibig sabihin, kahit na wala ka pang ginagawa as part of their process, just because they designated you as a terrorist group, you can already go to jail. So yun yung mahirap eh, hindi siya katulad na malayong-malayo siya sa Human Security Act.
Okay.
Attorney,
go ahead, Attorney Erin.
Yes, just to add to what Dino mentioned, what is different between the HSA, the Human Security Act, and the Anti-Terror Act of 2020 is that the Human Security Act was clear on what are the elements of terrorism. Dito, kailangan may predicate crime. Meron kang krimen na gawa bago ka ma-consider bilang isang terorista. Dito sa Anti-Terror Act of 2020, wala na yung element na yon. Anong pwede mong gawin, pwedeng kilalanin ng Anti-Terrorism Council as bilang a terrorist act. So, it's that vague na kung ang discretion ay ibibigay sa mga police, no? At walang guidelines, kahit sino ngayon at kahit anong gagawin mo, ay pwedeng mabansagan na yan ay isang terrorist act. So yan yung pagkakaiba, no? So may chilling effect. So you cannot move, you cannot act, you cannot speak because for fear that the Anti-Terrorism Council may consider that as a terrorist act.
Yeah, Attorney, what do you say to yung oft-repeated line naman ng proponents ng bill that there are safeguards? Specifically, they keep saying, it's very explicit dyan, protest is protected speech, and so on. Going to that, what do you say to that?
Meron ring sumunod na phrase doon, no, Robby, na sinasabi, pero kung itong mga gagawin ninyo ay sasakit ng ibang tao o may destruction of property, then pwede pa rin kayong mabansagan terorista. So even if you are exercising your right to protest, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, but there are certain acts that happen during the protest, no? Pwede kayong mabansagan na hindi naman, wala naman sa plano, nagkagulo ng konti, may infiltrator, pwede ka mabansagan na terorista doon dahil nga sa exception na nilagay rin sa dulo.
Kumbaga, may exception sa exception. So balik ka dun sa una.
Balik ka rin sa una.
Wala, ang sagot dyan nung
Ang problem namin doon, no,
Yes, please go
Go ahead,
ahead.
Attorney De Leon.
Okay, ang problem namin doon sa exception na yan, nasabi, 'di ba, sa law. The promise of the law is protest, dissents, and other similar conducts will not be punished, sabi yan sa anti-terror law. However, the power to actually determine whether it's a protest, it's a legitimate protest, it's actually a legitimate form of dissent, is actually with the ATC, the Anti-Terror Council. So anong mangyayari dyan? Paano kung dinesignate nila na yung speech mo is not actually protest, it's not actually dissent? So what's gonna happen? They will order your detention for 14 days and then they can even extend it for 10 more days. The question is, who will determine whether these are legitimate protests and dissents? Can a person, after being arrested, go to court? Sabi naman nung batas, hindi, legitimate na, nag-iimbis na pa nga kami. In fact, may power to designate yung Anti-Terrorism Council. So that's the problem. Even though yung qualifications ng law na protest, dissents, and other similar conduct will not be punished, to us, given that execution of the law is worthless, empty, and meaningless at the end.
Well, ang sagot nga dyan ng mga government officials natin and the proponents in the Senate, who include significantly si Minority Leader Franklin Drilon, he voted for that. meron daw presumption of regularity dapat. Saka yun nga daw yung definition of a terrorist, kailangan i-clear. And even the warrantless arrests that are approved by the ATC, i-clear daw sa afterwards, although afterwards nga, with the Court of Appeals and alerted sa Commission on Human Rights. So ang sinasabi ng mga kapareho nila, Secretary Lorenzana, in so many words, it boils down to trust your government. Can you actually bring the debate to yun na nga, na it's a matter of lack of trust in this government? Attorney Tañada, siguro.
Well,
we contest that, no. Actually, with due respect to those people who say na may presumption of
Nawala. Maybe Attorney Tañada siguro medyo nawala.
Yes, of course, that would be always the argument. But the fear here is that the specter of the sword hanging over your head, that now you're not sure on whatever you say will get you arrested or get you detained by the authorities is what bothers the advocates, dahil maliwanag naman sa Anti-Terror Act na yung kapag magdesisyon ang Anti-Terrorism Council, ang gagawin lang naman nila is to just inform the court na meron silang hinuli. Hindi magkakaroon ng proceedings para malaman kung yung tao ay terorista o hindi. Just to inform. So walang sinasabi na kailangan idinig natin kung siya ay terorista o hindi. At ito ay pwedeng humaba ng 24 na araw. At yan ang nakakatakot dito. Yung sinasabi naman yung pagpunta sa Court of Appeals, yan po ay preliminary lang. There is, it is just a preliminary determination, but still, at the end of the day, the 24 days that a person can be detained is very crucial, and that itself is a violation of the Constitution.
But Attorney Tañada, maybe to rephrase yung tanong ni Ami, because the question of trust is an important thing. Is it about trust or distrust of this particular government? Are you saying that the law itself cannot be trusted with any administration?
Well, first of all, I would say that the law is a violation of the Constitution. And if they wanted to come out, we're not saying that we don't need an anti-terror law. If they wanted to come out with a clear-cut, constitutionally viable terror law, they should have not rushed the process also with the House of Representatives, where there were people who wanted to amend the version that the committee came out with, but were told that they would just adopt the Senate version. So this alone would show that how can we trust the government if the process itself in the House does not allow amendments to correct maybe mistakes in the version of the Senate?
Well, speaking of mistakes, kung hindi naman daw trust in government, pwede daw naman yung as a deterrent, yung provision doon for wrongful arrest, pwedeng makulong yung police kapag hinuli at subsequently na clear yung mali pala. He can go to jail for up to 10 years. Although wala na yung fine na 500,000, saka nabawasan from 12 to 10, nandun pa rin yun at sinasabi nila, syempre mag-iingat pa rin yung mga police. What policeman wants to go to prison for 10 years for, presuming regularity nga in doing their job, for doing their job. So hindi ba kayo reassured nun? I'm just telling you the arguments of those who are pushing for this.
Yes.
We don't feel reassured at all. We don't feel reassured at all, no. Actually, I just wanna say na it's not true that there's presumption of regularity when it comes to arrests. In fact, the burden of proving that the arrest was legitimate and there was an actual crime committed, that the crime was actually committed, is the state. So hindi pwede yung nag-aresto sila tapos presume regular. No, the burden is on them actually to prove that that there is a crime that was committed. So when it comes to actually taking a look at the Bill of Rights and yung mga fundamental protection natin, that actually operates under a system wherein we distrust the government, because the government, based on history, has actually done a lot of excesses in dealing with citizens. So yun dapat ang perspective na tingnan natin when it comes to Bill of Rights. It's construed strictly against the government.
Attorneys, several members of the cabinet have been pretty consistent when it comes to, specifically mga members ng NTF-LCAC, yung End Local Communist Insurgency. They've been pretty consistent in tagging certain members of the left, certain groups of the left, as being allied or affiliated or being simply connected with the CP, NPA, and DF. I'm wondering how we should situate these groups now that the Anti-Terror Act is really a law, and the Anti-Terror Council can easily just tag them or designate them as terror groups. So ano ngayon ang kalagayan ng mga grupong ito na dati nang tinatag ng gobyerno?
For my clients, I'm representing the youth petitioners. So a lot of my clients have already been red tagged before just because they've expressed their dissent. Ang nakakatakot po dyan is even the National Security Advisor himself said that kung tahimik ka naman, wala kang problema. Let's remember that the National Security Advisor is actually a member of the Anti-Terrorism Council based on the Anti-Terror Act of 2020. So if a member is already saying na kung tahimik ka, wala kang problema, it means that the problem is not really just committing terrorist activities, but actually the problem is the fact that you are speaking out against the government. That's our problem. And that came from a member of the ATC. So if we're talking about presumption of regularity, the declarations of the National Security Advisor is presumed to be regular. So yun ba ang aim ng law? Yun yung nakakatakot siya.
Ang ginagamit po ng
attorney,
I remember I remember kasi ginagamit ng NTF-LCAC na argument to link members of the or groups of the left with the CPP and PNDF is an interview with Joma Sison several years back, where Joma said that some of these groups are what he would consider part of the front of the revolution, or some words to that effect. I'm wondering kung with that statement being used and being shared around social media, would that in itself, under the law, put these groups in the ambit of terrorism, if you follow the law itself?
Maybe Atty. Erin or...
Well, if you follow the law itself, and the law is not stricken down by the Supreme Court, yes, the possibility of these groups being identified as terrorist groups, it will be there. And again, what is fearful about the whole process is that the decision to brand them as terrorists does not pass through the courts. If the law is upheld by the Supreme Court, it can be decided upon by the Anti-Terrorism Council, and it will take a while before, if anyone is picked up, take a while before this person can see his day in court. This is what we fear with this law. So it is important that the Supreme Court will see it, that this law is dangerous because it gives too much power to the Anti-Terrorism Council to brand people as terrorists without judicial intervention.
Okay, Atty. De Leon, Atty. Tañada, I mean, as we've been reporting, I think 15 na ngayon yung mga petition na naka...
16.
16 na pala. I just want to take time also to understand the process and the options for the Supreme Court moving forward. So, endgame, ano po ba ang options sa Supreme Court dito? The Supreme Court will just have to uphold or to reject the entire law, or can they parse through the challenges and the particular provisions and basically take a surgical knife to particular points. And put two options in court.
Well, Robbie, the Supreme Court can declare the whole law as unconstitutional. That's one. Or they can remove particular parts of the law which they feel violates the Constitution. So they can act like a surgeon. Now, the problem here is that baka sa tingin namin, sa dami ng dapat tanggalin, whatever would be left would still make the law ineffective. Then you might as well just veto, declare the whole law unconstitutional and return it back to the legislature so they can figure out how to draft a new law that would comply with the Constitution.
I see.
Okay. Attorneys Erin Tañada and Dino de Leon. Sir, attorneys, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And
Thank you
ingat
Very
po.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, we will just pause for a break, but when we come back, we'll still go back to this story. We'll talk to another attorney who filed the petition on the anti-terror law. So please stay with us.
Welcome back to the Chiefs. We are now in the final stage of our conversation. And now joining us is Attorney Algamar Latiph. He's the former chairperson of the Regional Human Rights Commission of the ARMM. And Attorney Latiph is also among the lawyers from the Bangsamoro region who want certain provisions struck down from the anti-terror law, saying that they risk abuse against Muslims. Good evening po, Attorney Latiph. Welcome to the Chief.
Good evening po.
Yes.
Good evening din po.
We're with Robia Lampay and Ed Lingaw.
Hi, sir. Assalamualaikum.
Ay, alaikum salam.
It's interesting that the Muslim groups have also joined this the petitions, no? Because the government is saying na isang priority nila in the Anti-Terror Act is to go after terrorists in Mindanao. Ano po ba yung main argument nyo in your petition, particularly with regard to the Muslims?
Ang argumento po namin ay nakatugon doon sa Section 29 na pwedeng manghuli yung police, law enforcer at military base sa suspicion. Sa amin po, 8 provision po ng Constitution ang nababiolate nito at hindi po ito mapoprotektahan niya yung mga tao kasi base rin po sa mga nakakulong sa SICA, dito sa BGMP, sa Kabangong Diwa, dyan sa Bikutan, ay marami pong mga mistaken identity po na napalaya. At ang aming argument po ay yung pagkustodiyan ng tao po ay judiciary. Judicial po siya. The moment na hulihin ka ay judicial po. Meron po sa Constitution natin na inviolable yung personal security and liberty. Pangalawa po, ang batas po natin, ang exclusive jurisdiction din po ng pag-issue ng warrant of arrest ay yung husgado. At base ito po sa probable cause. At hindi lang sa probable cause, kailangan may complaint, kailangan merong witnesses, at kailangan tanungin sila ng husgado, at kailangan masatisfy yung husgado na yung ebidensya na pinresent ay may probable cause. Dito po hindi. Ang probable cause ay nawala. Nakalagay lang po dito sa batas ay suspicion na pwede ka nang hulihin ng law enforcer. Sa amin po ay delikado po ito.
Attorney,
yes.
Sundutin ko lang po yung sa suspicion. Kasi ang sabi naman ng government side, yung mga defenders niyan, it's counter-terrorism, so hindi pa daw nangyayari yung crime at gusto lang nilang i-prevent. Okay ba sa inyo yung ganong explanation? Kaya nga on suspicion daw, gusto nilang pigilin bago mangyari.
Hindi po yung gusto nilang masusunod. Ang masusunod po ay yung saligang batas. Kahit po in times of war at saka in times of martial law, 3 days lang pwede mong i-detain yung tao kung walang kaso. Marami po tayong mga ibang karumadumal din na mga krimen katulad ng kudeta, IHL, crimes against humanity sa IHL law, pero walang ganitong 14 to 24 days. Ang 14 to 24 days na to ay isa itong bill of attainder kasi kukulong ka, wala kang kaso, tapos nakakulong ka. The moment yung tao ay ikulong, yan ay judicial yan. Kumbaga sa husgado, kaya kami tinatawag po tayong judicial custody. Hindi po administrative detention ang nasa saligang batas natin. Kaya kung titignan po natin yung Section 2, Article 3 ng Constitution, matindi yung pagkakagawa rito ng mga framers ng Constitution. Talagang pinoprotektahan. At nakalagay din po dito kung ano yung procedure ng pag-aresto at pag-detain ng tao. Ang pwede lang po mag-detain at mag-aresto ng tao ay kautusan ng husgado. At kailangan yung ebidensya ay nandoon, probable cause. At isang point din namin dito ay yung kumulong ay exempted sa Article 125. Ito yung arbitrary detention. Kumbaga, pwede kang i-detain 14 to 24 days na walang kaso. Sa pamamagitan ng suspicion, paano kung itong tao na to ay suspicion ay nakulong hanggang 24 days tapos hindi pala siya. Wala pala siyang kasalanan.
Attorney, gusto ko nga pong sundan yung...
Pwede siyang makulong ng 10 years.
Sorry.
Wrongful detention. Hindi po kayo nare-reassure ng provision na yan. Pwede
hindi po kami reassure ng provision po. Dito po meron po kami isang kaso dyan na makasama ko mga abogado. Ito po yung kaso na for 18 years nandiyan na walang conviction kahit isa. Doon sa kaso na yon, 41 ang nasa on record yan, court record yan. 41 ang mistaken identity. For 18...
Attorney, gusto ko lang... Attorney, gusto ko lang sundan yung punto nyo kanina about maraming mga tao nakakulong na on mistaken identity. You've mentioned a lot of the provisions that the other petitioners have also mentioned in general, basically the same concerns. But I'm curious, lalong-lalo na po sa background nyo as a lawyer from the Bangsamoro region, and you also mentioned this in your petition, the dangers of prejudice and stereotyping. Can you speak to particularly the interest and the vulnerability of our Muslim communities when it comes to the realities of facing anti-terror laws in the Philippines?
Very real po ito kasi nung January 31, ay nag-issue ng memorandum yung NCR po natin na i-profile yung mga high school at saka college na mga Muslim na nag-aral dito sa NCR. Tapos nilift yun, pero matindi yung nangyaring nangyaring protesta doon. So pangalawa po, yung doon sa Malay-Balay, yung nagkaroon ng branding tungkol doon sa mga terorista. Ito po yung kasi yung danger nito, nakikita natin yung stereotyping at prejudice na nadanasan namin. Base po sa pagiging abogado ko for almost 20 years, ang mga experience namin ay maraming mistaken identity. Katulad po nung Bikutan Siege, si Commander Robot nandoon. 26 po yung namatay. Ang gusto po namin ay may hustisya na sila ay na-convict o na-acquit ng court. Yung po yung tunay na hustisya. Hindi po sila dapat pinapatay ng gano'n na sabi ng Human Rights Commission na nag-imbestiga ay merong extreme force na ginamit. So, sa amin pong mga experience, karamihan po, pwede pong tignan po dyan data sa Bikutan, BJMP kasi lahat po ng nahuhuli doon sa Mindanao ay dito po binibiyahe sa BJMP. Kawawa naman po yung mga akusado na inosente na sila po yung nagsasuffer ng mga batas na hindi naman dapat sila ang hulihin. So ito po base po sa experience namin. Kami po naman sa mga moral lawyers, kami po ay kumukundina dito sa terorismo na to. In fact, kami po yung nagsasuffer. So merong Marawi Siege, Marawi Siege at na-destroy yung Marawi dahil doon. So kahit na na-destroy yung Marawi, ngayon, yung terorismo nandiyan pa rin, hindi rin na-solve. So yun po yung may hirap sa amin na kumbaga, yung innocenteng civilian na base sa prejudice, base sa stereotyping pag Muslim, sa mga checkpoint, pag din Muslim, mga experience sila, nakakumbong, nakabelo po, ay pinag-i-strictuhan po sila at sinisita sila. Ganun po yung experience po ng mga kaya namin.
Attorney, I suppose the irony is not lost on you na ang ginagamit pong dahilan, isa sa mga primary na ginagamit na dahilan para i-justify yung anti-terror law, yung problema ng terorismo sa Mindanao. Gayon pa man, ang dami kong mga kaibigan at mga kakilala na mga Muslims Mindanao na tumututol dito. At isama na rin natin pati yung BARM. At a certain point, yung BARM was calling for a veto of the anti-terror law. Bagamat ang ginagamit ng dahilan, yung terorismo na kayo nagsasuffer.
Yun nga po, okay lang naman sana kung nakikita namin sa yung mga nahuhuli ay mga talagang sila yung mga nagkasala sa batas. Pero sa aming mga, kasi naging chairperson ako ng Commission on Human Rights sa ARMM, maraming mga complaint na binibigay po sa amin tungkol dyan na kinukuha, inaaresto dito sa Mindanao tapos binibiyahe rito sa Manila. May mga napalaya kami na after na mapalaya ay kakasuhan uli. May napalaya na after 1 week nakalaya siya ay hindi namin alam na patay na. May mga ganun pong mga senaryo. So kung titignan po namin yung delay ng pag-prosecute sa kanila hanggang ngayon, hindi rin sila napoprosecute ng maigi. So,
pero Attorney, mag-zoom in ako sa isang bagay tungkol dito. For example, yung BARM nga na sinabi nga natin na for a while was calling for a veto dun sa anti-terror bill na pinirmahan ng Pangulo, so naging law na. Ngayon, from our understanding, yung BARM is now asking at the very least for representation dun sa ATC, yung Anti-Terror Council, na may kapangyarihan na on probable cause mag-utos ng aresto at mag-designate ng isang tao, isang grupo na terror group. Of course, meron po kayong petition to invalidate yung anti-terror law. Pero anong tingin niyo dito sa panukala ng BARM na andyan na yan, bigyan na lang ninyo kami ng kinatawan doon sa ATC para merong safeguard?
Yes, nag-ano na po dyan si President si Harry Roque tungkol dyan. Ang sabi niya gano'n ay nasa batas kung sino yung mga members.
Opo.
Yung BARM po ay kasama siya as one of the, pagkaalam po ay secretariat at saka yung National Commission on Muslim Filipino. Pero hindi sila kasama doon sa
member.
meeting. So, ang gusto ng BARM kasi doon sa kanilang resolution ay masama sila doon sa mga policy meeting. Yun yung gusto nila. Na
Opo. But your point of view on that, what do you think of that suggestion? Of course, we know that you have a petition to invalidate the law itself, pero there's also this proposal by the BARM na if you cannot invalidate it, why not give us additional safeguards by putting us in the ATC? Ano ang tingin doon?
Maganda po yun na magkaroon ng membership, pero kailangan po amendahan muna yung batas. Pero kahit na po nandiyan po yung BARM, which is kunyari, kasama siya sa ATC as policy making body at isa lang, ay hindi pa rin kami naniniwala na may kung hindi tumawala itong Section 29 na mapoproteksyonan yung mga ordinaryong civilian na wala namang kinalaman sa mga terrorist.
Parang bitin pa rin. Parang ilan.
Attorney, considering the peace and order situation sa Mindanao, lalo na dun sa lugar na BARM, sa tingin nyo ba kailangan natin ng anti-terrorism law?
Yes po, kailangan po talaga natin ng anti-terrorism law. Pero yun nga, kailangan po ito ay nakatugma sa konstitusyon natin, sa ligang batas natin, kasi yan lang ang pwedeng mag-regulate sa state kung ano yung dapat gawin. At itong konstitusyon natin to ay pinanganak ito dahil sa isang pagkiting sa karapatan natin noong panahon ng martial law at diktadurya. So yun po yung intensyon ng mga gumawa ng ating konstitusyon. Kaya kung titignan mo, babasahin mo yung Bill of Rights, makikita mo talaga na pinag-igiyan yan na yung liberty, personal security ay maprotektahan kahit na anong panahon. At yung worst na panahon na mako-contemplate natin na state of war in case of invasion o martial law, 3 araw lang. At kung wala kang kaso ay dapat kang i-release. Ito up to 24 days. Hindi ka pwedeng i-release at administrative at hindi sa judicial detention.
Yung binanggit niyo pong 3 days, narinig ko po yung explanation ng iba nating security officials dyan. Sabi nila, may na-arresto sila or may na-pick up sila na suspect na napilitan silang pakawalan within yung allowed period. Tapos later, naging involved pala dun sa Marawi. Yun ang sinasabi nila na kung meron na daw yung ganyang batas noon, baka daw na hindi natuloy yung Marawi siege. Do you agree with this kind of explanation?
Yung isang incident at isolated incident na ganyan, hindi po dapat maging justification. Kung meron silang mahuli, kasuhan po nila. Tapos kumuha po sila ng ebidensya kasi may nandiyan naman yung piskal.
Wala pong terrorism.
At hindi rin ako naniniwala na dahil lang doon sa isang kaso na yon ay nagkaroon ng Marawi siege. Yung Marawi siege po hindi limited po sa Mauti yan dahil composite yan ng iba't ibang mga terrorist organization group. Kung makikita natin galing sa mga iba't ibang lugar yan ng Mindanao at nagsama-sama dyan.
Baka daw na.
Attorney, iba-ibang levels na po yung napapag-usapan natin at sinasamantala din natin yung hindi lang pagka-abogado but being an advocate for Muslim Mindanao in general. We've been talking about terrorism. Malinaw naman ang position nyo. Kailangan natin ng anti-terrorism law. We're talking about the constitutionality of the Anti-Terrorism Act. And then we're talking about the peace and order situation and the stability of Mindanao in general. Ilabas po natin ng konti doon sa mangyayari sa Supreme Court. Magsosona po ang presidente sa Monday. What would you like to hear from the president with regards to Muslim Mindanao?
Una po, napapasalamat po kami sa presidente dahil siya po talaga yung presidente na very sincere na ipasa itong Bangsamoro Organic Law. Wala po akong alam na presidente na kahit na nagkaroon pa ng Marawi siege, dapat usually nung nagkaroon ng wala na yung BOL pero ito nagkaroon ng Marawi siege ay napasa pa rin yung Bangsamoro Organic Law. Ang gusto ko pong marinig sa presidente ay sana itong context ng anti-terrorism, counter-terrorism po sa Mindanao ay may konteksto po. kung makikita po nyo ang violence na nangyayari po dyan, saturated violence po na nangyayari dyan, matindi po yung violence. Everyday po meron pong nakakaroon ng displacement sa mga iba't ibang lugar. Ito pong violence na nangyayari between conflict with the military and mga extremist group, ay sana naman po minsan pag-isipan kung ito ay yung civilian na maapektuhan, kasi yung civilian ay sila yung nagkakaroon ng mga grievance sa gobyerno na magsumama dito sa mga extremist group. Kailangan po natin ng approach na hindi lang military at physical, kasi ito pong violent extremism ay conscious nito, ideal ito. Hindi ito physical, kundi yung kaisipan ng mga kabataan na discontent. Katulad dyan sa nangyari sa Marawi City, nasira, na-destroy yung Marawi City, pero yung consciousness ng violent extremism ay mas lalo pang lumala. Kasi meron silang masasabi sa mga i-recruit nila, o tignan mo yung gobyerno, sinira niya yung society natin, yung Marawi City, sinira niya. So, iyan po yung pang-recruit nila. So, doon sa mga nagkaroon po ng mga ano dyan sa Marawi, yung mga post-traumatic doon sa mga kabataan, na kumbaga, may mga ano doon, nagdo-drawing sila ng mga aeroplano at saka yung Marawi. At tinitignan nila ng hero nila ay yung mga nakaitim. So bakit po ganun, mga bata pa yon? Kasi nakikita nila na yung military ay sinisira yung kanilang city. So ito pong mga vulnerability na ganito, hanggang ngayon po yung Marawi City nandiyan pa rin. Sana naman ay yung Marawi City ay magkaroon na ng reconstruction ay mapunuan para at least kami po yung nagsasuffer ng mga direct talaga na nahihit ng mga internally displaced person dito sa Mindanao. So sana pag-aralan yung mga itong batas natin na talagang hindi siya maging subject of abuse, hindi siya maging subject ng gagamitin sa mga nakalagay sa petition natin. So doon sa mga nagdi-dissent sa gobyerno, kasi nasa constitution natin na magpetisyon sa gobyerno.
At attorney, sa ngayon, sa tingin niyo, considering the situation, sabi nung iba, mataas pa din yung terrorist threat, especially in Mindanao. Sa tingin niyo, pwede pang maulit yung nangyari sa Marawi, kahit not on that scale. Meron pa ba yung threat na yon? Considering the situation in Mindanao, lalo ngayon, naghihirap, lalo with the pandemic, lalong dumadami yung naghihirap. There's a, yung chance na tataas yung discontent nandun eh. Sa tingin nyo, nandun pa rin, gaano kataas yung terrorist threat sa tingin nyo?
Hindi po, actually, hindi po ako expert sa ganyang, kung ilan yung gaano kataas yung threat. Ang terorismo po ay, sa akin, wala kasi silang political space, wala silang vulnerable talaga yung community, kaya doon nila na-express yung kanilang yung mga kabataan na discontent sa pamamagitan ng taas. So, dapat bigyan natin sila ng espasyo para at least hindi sila mag-resort sa violent extremism. Kung makikita natin ang mga nagli-lead ng mga violent extremism, ito yung mga highly educated. Pero yung mga recruit nila, ay ito yung mga balo, mga orphan, yung mga nasa poverty na madali mo lang maingganyo para ma-recruit. So yan yung dapat tutukan ng gobyerno.
Yung presence ng foreigner sa Mindanao, meron po ba kayong nare-receive na report na nadadagdagan, nababawasan, yung involved sa ganyang mga recruitment?
Hindi ko po alam yan. Abogado po ako, hindi ko masyado alam sa mga intelligence report tungkol din.
Walang humihingi na nga. Kasi yun ang nila dyan eh. Sige,
Okay. Again, si Atty. Latiph, dating head ng Regional Human Rights Commission, di ba, sir?
Yes, nagkasakay po tayo doon nung nagkaroon sa Mapasapano sa aeroplano, magkatabi yata tayo.
Opo. Tanda ko po, mga 2015.
Yes, nung pababa DB4.
Yes, sir. Sir, Atty. Algamar Latiph, maraming salamat po sa inyo at good luck po sa inyong ginagawa.
Yes, you're welcome po. Salamat po sa inyo lahat.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. That will be all for this special edition of the Chiefs. We hope to discuss here will keep the conversation going. I'm Ed Lingao for News.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News.